Good afternoon. Thank you for attending today's webinar, which is entitled Buy Now, Pay Later Loans, Convenient Now, Risky Later. Look forward to what I think will be a really good session on this rapidly developing, rapidly innovative new type of lending product and sort of discussing the implications for it. Before we kick off, I wanted to let you know that we'll have questions a little bit later. So during the session, you can put questions in the chat, and then we'll have a question and answer session a little bit further on. And so we hope that you'll have good questions and we can answer them and have a robust conversation. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have three great panelists today. I'm going to do an introduction and then one other thing to discuss. So Christina Tetreault is the Innovation Officer for California's financial regulator, the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. Christina joined the department in 2021 to actually stand up the new office. Prior to joining DFPI, she led the financial policy team at Consumer Reports, so she may be very familiar to many of you. And as a point of full disclosure, Christina and I have worked together for a long time on setting up the United States faster payments system. So I'm really excited to see her again in this new role. Spencer Watson has been an LGBTQ rights advocate for over 15 years. He's worked in numerous nonprofits in various roles in communications, in campaigns, and in direct service roles, including as a counselor offering financial and credit education to clients. Spencer's a May 2018 graduate of Berkeley Law, where their studies offering financial and consumer financial protection issues, prudential regulation, lending discrimination, and civil rights. In 2017, Spencer interned at the CFPB in its Office of Fair Lending, and he's previously worked at Consumers Union. He has a BA in English literature and in molecular, cellular, and developmental biology. I don't have that degree, by the way, from the University of Colorado Boulder. And finally, Pete Smith is a senior researcher at the Center for Responsible Lending, where he leads their work on overdraft practices and works on mortgages, student loans, and bank payday loan issues. He's been at CRL since 2005. He's authored numerous reports and briefs and has created a body of often cited literature. He's born and raised in Maryland. He attended the University of Maryland's honors program, where he graduated with a BS in mathematics. He's currently based in CRL's Oakland office, and he also has a master's degree in city planning from the University of California at Berkeley. This webinar is a product of a research paper that CFA and CRL published recently. Along the way, we worked with a lot of state groups, and I'd like to thank them for the role they did in performing this work. CalPIRG, the Center Valley Immigration and Integration Collaborative, the Center for LGBTQ Economic Advancement and Research, Spencer's group, the East Bay Community Law Center, Housing and Economic Rights Advocates, Next Gen Policy, the Senior Advocacy Network and Senior Law Project, the Greater Sacramento Urban League, Inclusive Action Public Council, and the California Alliance for Consumer Education. And then I'd like to extend a special note of appreciation for the Rose Foundation, who provided the support for this project. We appreciate their generosity, their interest in ensuring consumers are protected in this burgeoning place. And so with that, I'd like to kick it off and invite Pete to make a presentation on our report.
Hey, everybody, and welcome and thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to be here talking to everybody about this work. I'm going to share my screen. I've got a presentation. All right, is everybody seeing it okay? Excellent. If you see me looking off to the side, it's because it's a second monitor, so don't be too spooked. Okay, so I'm going to be talking today about a paper that was jointly published by CFA and CRL in October of last year. I was one of the authors, and the other two authors have moved on from their respective places of employment. Rachel Gittleman at CFA and Lucia Maddox here at CRL. But honestly, the work was as much theirs as it was mine, and probably more theirs than it was mine. But I think we accomplished a lot. So for some background, buy now, pay later, which we will abbreviate as BNPL occasionally, or also called pay in 4. These products allow consumers to purchase goods in 4 equal and often interest-free installments over a set time period, often 6 weeks. Buy now, pay later is often available directly at checkout on an e-commerce website, like Amazon or Apple, or through a third-party smartphone or web application. Some of the examples of third-party BNPL providers are Affirm, Afterpay, Klarna, Splitit, Sezzle, PayPal, Perpay, and QuadPay, which is also known as Zip. Buy now, pay later is structured in a way that avoids coverage under the Truth in Lending Act and other federal credit regulations like the CARD Act. Providers must be licensed to operate in California. So when we talk specifically about the California context, there is a layer of regulation that doesn't exist in other places in the nation. But part of the main concern, we'll get more into this kind of as we go along, but part of the main concern is that because there is a structure where there are 4 or fewer installments, there's a carve out for the Truth in Lending Act that permits buy now, pay later to kind of fly under that radar. So part of our concern at CRL is that, we may not understand all that we could about the product were it classified with other kinds of credit. But I get ahead of myself. Looking at the kind of existing research body that lies out there, this is a fairly new product, as you'll hear. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, surveyed 5 buy now, pay later providers in 2021 and found that those providers made 180 million loans in 2021 for $24 million in credit. I have a hard time with big numbers, sometimes knowing how to put them in context. Note that this is a 10-fold increase from just 2 years earlier, 2019. I think largely buy now, pay later started in the beauty and apparel sectors, and it has been broadening into other sectors. So as we've seen that broadening into different sectors, it's obviously we've seen a big growth in the overall market. Another important piece of existing research, polling firm Morning Consult surveyed buy now, pay later use in 2022 and found that users were significantly more likely to incur overdrafts than non-users. The Student Borrower Protection Center found in 2022 that borrowers were using buy now, pay later loans to finance their student loans. So this is a connection between 2 kinds of axes of people's financial behaviors and some of the issues and traps that people may get into with their finances, combining student loans and point of sale purchase of objects. Finally, there's some other early research and investigation, both by US PIRG, FICO, the Fair Isaac Credit Organization, and journalists at New York Times, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, and countless other smaller reporting agencies. For our survey, we, CFA and CRL together, designed and conducted an online and print survey, which we call the BNPL survey for short, of clients of 12 California partner organizations. And Adam named those partner organizations, and I'd like to just again reiterate our thanks and appreciation to them. These are organizations that have access via direct service and membership to folks that we at CFA and CRL may not have that direct access to. So it's really great when we're starting a survey and there's not just an easy access or a roll call for people who have taken these loans out. These member organizations really allow us to do our work. Our purpose was to understand the use of buy now, pay later financing and to gauge users' understanding of the product. Our partner organizations fielded 1,027 surveys, and 363 of those were buy now, pay later users. The 363 respondents were asked a number of questions about their experiences with buy now, pay later and how they perceived the product. They were also asked a series of true and false questions about buy now, pay later credit and possible consumer risk. That's to kind of test the level of their understanding about the product. And then a set of questions about their demographic information and their financial wellness. The findings of our survey were corroborative of some of the other existing research that we've mentioned. Among survey respondents who used buy now, pay later, 37% incurred an overdraft fee in the last 6 months. Over 16% had been charged a late or rescheduling fee or other related fee, either by the buy now, pay later provider or by their bank within those last 6 months. Borrowers with lower incomes were more likely to use buy now, pay later credit because the purchase would not otherwise fit in their budget. So this is not a kind of, I was just curious about the product, but rather this was the option that they had in order to make this purchase, was to use this product. Nearly 3/4, 73%, viewed buy now, pay later as being most similar to either a credit card or another form of installment loan. Now, the notable difference between those two and buy now, pay later is, again, both of those are subject to the Truth in Lending Act and other state and federal credit laws, whereas buy now, pay later avoids many of those regulations. Finally, consumer understanding about how buy now, pay later functions and is regulated was very low. So what do we want to do with this? And I know we'll get a chance in the questions and in the discussion to talk a little bit more granularly about how we did what we did in the survey, but I know we're kind of want to be as brief as possible and to cover a lot of information as quickly as possible. So I want to talk about our policy recommendations too. The following recommendations should be adopted at the federal level. This is how we conclude our paper. CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, should clarify that buy now, pay later is in fact consumer credit. Federal regulators should provide oversight of providers through enforcement and supervision. Regulators should examine the buy now, pay later's compliance with some existing regulations, the Military Lending Act, the Electronic Funds Transfer Act, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, and then make sure that the buy now, pay later is not an unfair, deceptive, or abusive practice. Namely, and this is a personal favorite as a researcher, CFPB should collect and publish buy now, pay later use data. This is, and I'll say, I know we'll get a little bit more into this, but this was a humble survey. This is a survey that is not easily generalizable. We talked to partner organizations in California. They had a set of people that they work with regularly who had experience and had taken out buy now, pay later loans. But we don't expect that this research is necessarily generalizable to the set of buy now, pay later users in California or nationwide, or certainly not to the set of consumers in California or nationwide. But the only way that we can envision having a more rigorous survey that could be generalizable is for organizations like CFPB with the supervisory authority to collect and publish buy now, pay later use data. The only other option I could imagine is if the providers themselves made this data available. We would welcome either of those options for CFPB or the providers to make that data available. Finally, federal and state regulators should work together to ensure that consumers are protected. Next set of recommendations is for state, and they are going to look fairly similar, but it's important to remember that this issue could live both at the federal and at the state stage. So we don't want to leave anyone behind, especially not when we've got such an august representative of the state regulatory, Christina here from California. The following recommendations should be adopted at the state level. And I should point out immediately beforehand, grateful to California for having taken the first steps in this. They're the leaders among states in regulating these products. State regulators should provide oversight of providers through enforcement and supervision. California's gotten that started with a licensure system. Regulators should examine buy now, pay later compliance with existing regs, licensing and usury laws, And then again, unfair, deceptive, and abusive practices laws. Regulators should collect and publish buy now, pay later use data. We want more data. And finally, again, federal and state regulators should work together to ensure consumers are protected. Our final set of recommendations is for the providers themselves. Now, we don't necessarily think that we will be we're not at the negotiating table with the providers, but when we are establishing a kind of North Star, a set of what we think a responsible product could look like from buy now, pay later, this is what we see it. The following recommendations should be adopted by buy now, pay later providers. First, buy now, pay later products should be viewed and presented to consumers as credit. Providers should confirm a consumer's ability to repay, including their income and obligations, before offering products. Fees should be reasonable and proportional. The cost of credit should be presented as an APR so that consumers can compare across products that may have different durations. Consumers should have chargeback rights, as they do with credit cards. And finally, consumer data should only be used in a responsible way, and only when consumers understand and consent to its use overall. So that's the information that I'll present you with, rather. And then I think we will have a great chance, as I say, to drill down a little bit more and to talk a bit more about how we did what we did. But thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks, Pete. That's really great. I appreciate the thorough analysis of the conclusions. And some of the registrants have put questions in the chat regarding, can they see the report, and then what were the questions? And I've answered those. Just going back to Pete, I'm wondering, and I would ask the same question maybe for the other panelists, but could you talk a little bit about what you think the study reveals about which populations are using buy now, pay later? And so, yes, Pete, but then also Spencer and Christina.
So again, I alluded to it, I mentioned it during my presenting of the research, but I want to be clear that this is a small sample. It is not easily generalized. We're working with excellent providers, but these are not people chosen at random necessarily. We were looking to get a hold of customers of buy now, pay later. And what we found is that, and this comports with some previous research by the Federal Reserve, we found that buy now, pay later users in California are disproportionately lower income, female, and non-white. We found that buy now, pay later users are more likely to be Black, more likely to be Hispanic, and more likely to have an income between $20,000 and $50,000 annually than non-users.
I can't hear Spencer. I'm not sure if others are struggling to hear Spencer. I'm sorry.
Agreed. I'm having trouble.
Is this better?
Yes, there we go.
Great. So much for my fancy microphone. As I was saying, I'm sympathetic to Peter's difficulties in making demographic generalizable statements off of such a small set of survey responses, and that is a problem that I've also come across in my own research and reporting as well. I think it does confirm what certainly the CFPB found in their own reporting about buy now, pay later usage, which was based on anonymized and randomized data. And they too found that women were more likely to use buy now, pay later, as were Black and Hispanic people. And interestingly, they likewise noted a range of incomes that didn't indicate that the lowest income individuals are the most predominant users of buy now, pay later, those under $20,000, but those between $20,000 and $50,000. But another, I think interesting survey said that a majority are actually under $75,000, and so I think that where we can sort of see is that buy now pay later users are somewhere in the range where they have some small amount of consumptive income, but they don't have so much that they're just using credit and other financial products as sort of just an easy way to consume as opposed to a necessary way to consume. And so that's where I think that we also see in the CFPB's data that individuals are more likely to have credit, but to be highly extended on the credit that they do have, and that they are frequently revolving their credit and frequently also receiving fees for being over their credit limits. And so I think that's where it's interesting to see where are some of the drivers that are leading people to use buy now pay later, and I can get into a little bit more of that later. But I would also add that in all of this research, we have wonderful data collection about communities of color and people's sex, qua male female, but we don't have much information about sexual orientation and gender identity. And it is definitely my suspicion that people of non-binary or gender non-conforming gender identities, as well as just people who have sexualities other than straight, are also overrepresented among buy now pay later users.
I just want to say thank you so much for allowing me to be here. And thank you earlier for the introduction, Adam. And full disclosure, Spencer and I knew each other when they were at Consumer Reports. So I don't have anything to add in terms of the demographics. I just wanted to say that based on your research, and as Spencer mentioned, there other research, and Pete, in your presentation, you referenced other research. It really sounds like users look like California, which is to say diverse user base. Everywhere is financially constrained these days, it feels like, everywhere and everyone. And so I just really want to thank you for reaching out to also a diverse group of organizations to generate this information, because it is very helpful to us. I will say more broadly about the department and our look at, excuse me, buy now, pay later. As Pete referenced in his presentation, California has brought these products under our licensing law. That was back in 2019, and it was through a combination of litigation as well as a interpretive opinion, a legal opinion. So we went from 2019, 0% of our licensed loans being buy now, pay later, to a whopping 91% by the end of 2020. So the growth of these products has been immense. Yes. And that is public information. I'm not sharing anything secret. And it's really the growth in this marketplace. It's not surprising to me that it's reaching kind of all pockets of the economy. So again, thank you for this opportunity, and congratulations on the research.
That is an amazing statistic. I did not know that. So thank you. I want to go back to Christina. Innovation is in the name of your agency. It's right there. What do you tell fintechs when they want to enter this market?
So I'll start with just giving an overview of the department's mission, right? There was a law that the governor signed in 2020 that expanded the mission of the department. It turned it into the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. We used to be the Department of Business Oversight, which sort of speaks to that oversight role. But now with this expanded capacity we are also charged, in addition to supervision and enforcement, we are consumer protection agency, as well as promoting responsible innovation. So to this question about how to engage with a regulator, what do we look for? We're very interested in stakeholder feedback, and that is a very wide range. So we are a data-driven organization. We look for information about products and services. We try and meet with early stage entrepreneurs. We try and make that as easy as possible for people to come talk to us. So for example, My office hosts weekly drop-in office hours. That's Tuesday mornings between 9 and 10. And if you want to meet with us, all you have to do is fill out a little link on our website, and you will get a Zoom link and you can come chat with us. And we have had all kinds of conversations, everyone from consumers to early stage founders to established industry that's looking to expand their product lines, and they come talk to us. But it really is essential to have ongoing dialogue with stakeholders in order to help us really understand the marketplace, understand the ways in which products are used, and really trying to understand the context in which people are encountering these innovative products and services. Because as the commissioner likes to say, if it's not responsible, it's not innovative. So we want to help people understand department expectations, and therefore we really invite all the conversation that we can have, and that goes again to a wide range of stakeholders. So come talk to us.
Thanks, Christina. I really like hearing that it should be both responsible and innovative, not just one or the other. And more people ought to pay attention to that. So thank you for ensuring that in your role. Spencer, I just wanted to jump back to you, and you were saying some interesting things about consumer decision-making. And I wonder, you are an economist, if you could maybe dive down a little deeper for us. You're also a scientist.
I would dare not wear the shameful mantle of economist just yet. I would have to get a PhD before I would do that. But yeah, I think that one thing that I think of when I look at products like buy now, pay later, or really just consumer debt products in general, particularly those which would fall under sort of, more alternative type of structure. I want to understand why the company is offering it and why people are using it, and what are the sort of triggers that these companies are playing to that actually engage a consumer. Because I think all too frequently we can fall back on a father knows best type of mentality when we think about users of these products. And that they have more or less been fated to use these products because of the malign intention of these companies. And I think that we should give people a little bit of shadow of the doubt that they are usually using these for a reason, for rationality. And I pointed to some of those reasons earlier, that we're seeing that the majority of these users have credit, but they're overextended. They need an additional little bit of credit in order to acquire the purchase. And so I think that, with all credit products, there's this problem of overestimating immediate benefit of the purchased good and then underestimating the risk of default on the future payment. And so many of these people are overestimating the value of the immediate good that they're receiving, and then underestimate the fact that they may incur fees for a missed payment or an insufficient funds fee because the payment bounced. And so I think that when we look at the group of consumers that are overusing these products, I think it's unsurprising that we see the folks that we frequently see also overrepresented in alternative financial services products, right? Women, people of color, likely LGBTQ people. And I think one of the other interesting things about buy now, pay later products in particular that I've been seeing in doing a little bit of research about what are people using these products for, 50% of the purchases using buy now, pay later are for clothing. And 20% are for jewelry, and shoes are very popular. And so what I'm seeing here is also that people are consuming goods that are frequently fashion. And so these appeal to a very different set of purchasing habits that people have, because people purchase fashion for communication purposes, for reasons to display and communicate who they are with the world. And so people also tend to overspend on these types of products. 68% of people surveyed by LendingTree, why would I ever be citing LendingTree? But I'm glad that they do our opposition research for us. 68% of BNPL users said they overspend when they use BNPL. And so I think this is all to say that it's many new things, but a lot of the same old playbook. People get overextended using credit, and the companies are making their bank when people mess up. Peter, you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I know we've got to move along, but I do want to, and I think it's very important to point out what people are using buy now, pay later for. And it certainly started in the apparel and beauty purchase area, but CFPB found that 80.1% of that or the buy now, pay later market was those apparel and beauty process in 2019, and it's down to only 58.6% in 2021. And that the same CFPB survey found that buy now, pay later use for everyday or necessity products is up 434% in that same period from 2020 to 2021. So that could be a very small start, and then 434% doesn't have to go very high to get up to that big number. But our concern at CRL is, in fact, that it's not just shoes, that it's in fact people buying groceries, putting student loans on these products. So people may be overextended, but they're overextended on things that they legitimately need in their household life.
No, thanks. And I think this overextension question really gets into addressing a talking point you hear from industry, which is that this is a product that people who couldn't get credit use, right? What the data is showing is that they have credit and they're using this as well, which really gets into the concerns about overextension. Pete, I wanted to jump back to something that I found in your report that was really interesting in our report, which was just the notion of how well consumers understand BNPL. Could you go into a little depth on that?
Yep, absolutely. Sorry, I was finding my mute button. So we wanted to find a way to measure the understanding that consumers had of buy now, pay later. And so this is never the best methodology if you can do it another way, but we basically tried to trick panelists by asking them some true or false questions to see how well they understood the product. So we asked them several questions, and I'll tell you the answer afterwards. I cannot be charged fees when using buy now, pay later, or pay in full. And the correct answer is false, that many associated fees are possible. We asked buy now, pay later, or pay in full providers check your credit. It's similar to the way a credit card or loan does, and that's not true. It's only generally a soft pull that kind of establishes that you are a person, and that you are a person that has a checking account. Next, I can dispute a buy now, pay later, or pay in full charge if there's a billing error, or if I've attempted to return the purchased item, and that's not true. There's no requirement for this. We do have some anecdotal evidence that some of the companies, but not all, are allowing chargeback or returns on items. But again, there's no regulatory architecture to require this. Using buy now, pay later, or pay in full can improve my credit score. That's generally not true. Providers are not required to report any positive payment history to credit bureaus. This is not a way to build your credit up. And finally, the fifth statement was, if I don't pay for buy now, pay later, or pay in full product in full, it can be referred to debt collectors. And the correct answer on that was true. So we assigned a score, 1 point for a correct answer, -1 point for a incorrect answer, and 0 for the I don't know the answer to that. And we allowed people to specify true, false, or I don't know. And essentially, we found that the average knowledge level per respondent was getting less than 1 question correct. So people were slightly more likely to be right than wrong, but on a scale of 0 to 5, the average score was 0.29. So people are really under-informed and often incorrectly informed when it comes to understanding the way these products work. And again, it all just comes back to, for me, for our argument that this should be classified as credit. This should be something that people have predictable expectations around.
So thanks, Pete. I think that's a pretty significant finding. You know, you're talking about an innovative product. Does that mean that it's being well utilized and well understood? It's a big uncertainty. And I kind of wanted to jump to Christina because, you know, Pete talked about these tricks and traps, and also it sort of infers something about the need for financial education. What's your take there?
So I have spent a lot of time thinking about the ways in which people manage their money. It's one of the reasons why I decided to become a lawyer, is I've always wondered about people and money. And so that against the backdrop of the sort of irrational decisions that many of us make about our money, or at least I make about my money, right? Because they're really about what is it? Ron Lieber talks about life decisions versus money decisions, which I think is a great way of thinking about it. There's all sorts of research, though, that shows that people don't understand things like APRs. Right. And I can say, like, in my own household, like, I still am not sure that if I had to give the elevator pitch for how an APR works, that I could do it. In fact, I'm positive I couldn't on this call right now. So, right, it really is important that that there is a path to consumer understanding about the financial products and services that they use. And well, there are disclosure requirements and an ability to repay aspect of the California law. You know, it's very interesting, this feedback that's coming through the report. And I'd be curious to see how that aligns with other financial products, because as Adam, your question implies, right, America's financial literacy is pretty abysmal overall. And actually, there's a bill, I was watching the news this morning, there's actually a bill to require financial education in the California legislature right now. But I think it's also really speaks to the necessity for financial products to be free from, you know, pitfalls for the unwary.
Yeah, it's really true. I've heard so many people tell me about their great financial decisions, and I've never been at a party where someone told me about their totally disastrous investment. Seems like
Come sit next to me sometime.
So we talked a lot about extension of credit and some of these risks, but one thing we haven't hit on is, and something that's unique about buy now, pay later, is the amount of information that the buy now, pay later companies, in partnership with their merchants, are able to gather. And Spencer, this is something that I've heard you sort of express concerns about. I wondered if you could share some of those thoughts.
Right. Well, I mean, I think, you know, everybody is probably acutely on this call is likely acutely aware that there's just a massive amount of personal information about us that's lurking out in various different companies. Of course, you know, there are very well-known regulated entities and consumer reporting agencies and, you know, credit bureaus, but of course, now we have a very wide array of companies that are collecting personal data about us and sharing it with each other in, you know, various different ways. And so, you know, these companies are no exception in that regard. And, you know, their particular data of choice, I would assume, is marketing data about what are the consumption habits of people of various different demographic or tribe types, right? And so I would assume that, you know, in the LendingTree survey, that there was about, I think, a third or 40% of individuals who said that they pick vendors actually based off of the shopping platform buy now, pay later product that they are affiliated with. And so that in one way, buy now, pay later products are leveraging a brand in order to get people to use their product, but also companies are using buy now, pay later products, or there's an app that I use myself called Shop, which is operated by the platform Shopify, which manages thousands, if not millions of independent websites. And so then these buy now, pay later companies are referring customers from other websites based on their purchases to other websites. And so, for example, Shop apparently knows that I like to buy carnivorous plants. And so it gives me recommendations about good carnivorous plant suppliers and fertilizers and things that I could get. It knows that I like silver jewelry, and so it recommends silver jewelry. It knows that I have earplugs, so it recommends earplugs. And so all of this is to say that these, categories, whether I have earplugs or not, some of them may seem innocuous, but some of them do have a strong connection to, our demographic, or other protected classes that we might be concerned about. And so, that I think that this is where it remains to be seen how these companies are sourcing what companies they work with. Because I doubt that they are necessarily seeking out, particular demographic or market groups specifically, but they're definitely using their brand relationships in order to increase sales among those groups. And so that's where I think I have a little bit of concern, not only about overselling to those groups, but I also have concerns about data breaches at these organizations where it might then release sensitive personal information, such as people's gender identity or sexual orientation, that maybe they don't actually want revealed to the world.
These are great points, and I'm glad we got that part of it, because I think that's unique about BNPL versus, say, your credit card or an installment loan. Before we go to Q&A, I just wanted to ask each panelist, 1 minute, really quickly, what's worrying you going forward? What's something that you want to call out? And why don't we start with Pete?
I'll be short and sweet and say something that I've said a couple of times already. Just the idea of a product like this being under-regulated to the extent that it is, I just don't think it's appropriate. Let's just make the rules predictable and available to everyone, and then see what people want to use when they're informed.
Christina?
I'm going to flip the question on its head and just say I'm so proud of California. I'm not bragging about my own work, because the move to regulate buy now, pay later as credit happened before I got here. And I'm very excited to see what others in this space do. So thank you.
And I would say what worries me is that these products are targeting and making the most off of the most financially vulnerable amongst us. Because even if we're seeing a lot of folks in mid-income use them, the people who are going to be paying the bulk of the fees, just like with overdraft fees, are going to be the poorest among us. And that's going to be also amongst the financially marginalized, people of color, women, LGBTQ people. And so really, I just would say these products shouldn't exist, and we should just ensure all financial products are safe, affordable, and there's access.
So we had a question. One of the first questions was just about the fees. What are the fees, and also what are the fees that are being triggered on a bank account side from BNPL?
I can take a first stab at this. From the research that we did. We saw rescheduling fees when you change the schedule of repayment for the buy now, pay later loan. You incur a fee. When you are late on payment, you incur a fee. And then there are a few other sort of in the product fees, some of which vary by provider. But then we see a large group of folks who took buy now, pay later fees, or took buy now, pay later loans, and it led directly to overdraft fees. In fact, we've been analyzing some transactional data at CRL since this report came out, and finding examples of folks in a more randomly selected population who, when we look for overdraft, we're often seeing a kind of clustering of Afterpay and Pay in 4 products, showing that maybe these aren't kind of replacements for each other. People aren't doing buy now, pay later to avoid overdraft. They're doing both because they're financially constrained and because they're lacking income, and they may not understand the extent to which they're digging a hole deeper.
Christina, is this something your department in some way or another has kind of looked at in terms of the consumer experience in the fee question?
No, well, I should say, no, I don't know the answer. We do, as I mentioned, right, we have lending reports. We also accept consumer complaints. And I couldn't speak in depth about what those findings are. We don't publish our consumer complaints, although we do make our lending reports available. So if you want to check my numbers that I cited earlier or get the more up-to-date numbers, those are online on the DFPI website.
Interesting. Thank you. And we had a question about student loans. Does anyone have any further thoughts? If not, I do know that it's been cited in the report, in our report. But Pete, do you have anything on that?
No, I would just refer folks to the citation that came from the Student Borrower Protection Center. And I think the issue for me is, student loans is one example, but the issue for me is kind of the broadening set of things to which buy now, pay later can apply. Anything you would use PayPal for, many things you could use a credit card for, anything you could do at a point of sale. So I think it may not be specific to the purchase or the product that you're buying, but it's increasingly present and available as an option for all kinds of payment processes. Which is, if I were doing it, if I were in charge of buy now, pay later, that's how I would set it up too, so that you can just catch everyone and they can decide what they're buying, But I just don't think that that's exactly it's not good without regulations at this point.
Well, we've had a bunch of new questions come into the chat, and I love Ed's question. Do we have any details on what's happening? Maybe also what consumers understand versus what's really the truth about credit reporting, credit bureaus, and how all this is related to the assessment of a consumer's credit worthiness going forward.
I'll take that on. I will point earlier to what Peter said, that in their questionnaire that they asked whether buy now, pay later products improve people's credit score, and the correct answer was false, because many of these companies are not reporting to bureaus. And I think it's important to understand that the credit bureau creditor relationship is always a very complicated one, but that it's the users of data who are the customers of the bureau, but that they pay to report information to the bureau. And so there would be a strong incentive for I suppose these companies offering only very short, ideally short-term extensions to individuals, only of about 4 months, that they would have a lot more reporting to do, so many more customers, and so I doubt for their bottom line that they want to pay to do that reporting. So I think that's one reason why you're not seeing a lot of reporting, because it's costly for them. I also having done some credit education in the past about what goes into a score, it might unless somebody is a thin file and has no credit whatsoever, it might not even help their credit, because a 4-month installment loan would actually shorten their length of credit, which is a factor of a FICO score. So many of these people might not even want it reported to their credit. So that's my 2 cents.
Just a quick point, piggybacking on what Spencer just said, I completely agree with that. If we do want this reported to credit bureaus because we want it to enhance people's credit profiles, but there's going to need to be, and this is where Christina comes in, there's going to need to be some innovation in how that is done, because nobody is going to want, if people are out there buying 10 things on buy now, pay later credit, all the credit providers are diverse. They're using Klarna, they're using Sezzle, they're using PayPal, and now they've got 10 new open lines of credit, and that can be dangerous from a credit standing perspective. But I think I trust our innovators in the credit scoring business to figure out a way to do that does give people credit for making payments, but may not, open up the floodgate.
The only thing I would add is when Apple launched their version of this product, they actually launched it with credit reporting. And I don't know why that is. I actually haven't dug into their rationale behind it, but I thought that was a really interesting approach to start with that. And I'll be curious to see what we learn as a result of it.
Quick question for you, Christina. Is that product being used to finance electronic goods?
So as I understand it, it's available first within the Apple universe, and then also outside, depending. I think you have to, but I actually don't know enough about the mechanics of it.
Because it wouldn't surprise me if, yeah, these are, well, probably longer than 4 months. But I mean, people are financed with buying Apple goods. You're not spending only $150. You're spending a lot more.
Yeah, it's not jeans.
One of the interesting things that when Christina mentions that it's worth mentioning is these platforms. A lot of these products are often offered on platforms, call them walled gardens, but in essence, you're using Apple Pay. Thus, then you might start using Apple Pay later. You're using Shopify, all the kinds of integrations that go across that create almost new anti-competitive spaces. Hale had an interesting question, which I really like because it's certainly topical, timely, and then very relevant to how we regulate things in the United States. But what are the odds that CFPB will take action on BNPL in the next year? Obviously, that's kind of just an opinion, and also, but will this be a state issue or a federal issue in your view?
CFPB has released a few kind of things on the level of data summaries and some data briefs, and that to us CRL generally signals that they're looking at the practice, they're looking at the product, but knowing the other things that they have on their agenda and knowing that it is an election year, and I don't know what CFPB or Congress will have the appetite to take on this year, beyond just kind of consternation around the election. I really would not bet that we will have fulsome regulation within 2024, but I would love to be proven wrong about that.
I'm going to jump forward to a question Spencer mentioned in our conversation, which is just how you mentioned rent to own and BNPL and some degree of overlap, similarity, difference. Tell me about that.
I think this was in our discussion yesterday because I don't think I mentioned it today, but when I first saw buy now, pay later, the first thing that I thought of was rent to own, and that it's purchasing a specified good and agreeing to pay a certain contractual installment payment, right? This is how they're alluding to you. And so it feels very similar. But what's interesting about this time around is they don't come by and they don't collect your couch, right? They just sell you the jeans and then slam you with a fee for non-payment. And so I feel like it's a very similar model, and that's one reason why my intuition is that it's frequently the lower economic rungs that are using these products more often, and are often going to be the money makers for these schemes, because it's rent to own furniture. The scheme is you rent it to somebody, they can't make the payment, you come by, you get the couch, you just get their money, and you get to keep the couch. Now you can rent out the couch to somebody else and take their money. And so it's very similar, and I think that it wouldn't surprise me if part you know, I would love to see their revenue models, because I would assume that most of their revenue is not coming from the cut that they take from the retailer, which I'm curious if that's even really a cut, because obviously they're fronting the cash on behalf of the consumer to the small business, ostensibly, I would assume, which means that actually what they're just doing is they're reducing their payment to that small business, which would be the upfront payment, and then they're making their money off of these fees. And if they're making money off these fees, then again, it's going to be the poorest that are going to be paying the most fees. So that's you know, where I see a lot of overlap in, you know, how the financial industry invents something new, but it's the same thing over and over again. So
I was wondering, it's just a general question to any panelist about their thoughts on what the rise in BNPL is saying about the status of sort of household finances and household financial stability at this moment in time. It's kind of a broad, open-ended question.
Not good, Adam. People are struggling. I think that's my short answer.
Okay, well, yeah, that's a good point. I think I think that's key. We're almost at the end. I wanted to give the panelists a chance to just sort of finish up with maybe a minute of their thoughts on something they haven't covered. This is kind of a bullet round type moment. Christina, I thought maybe start with you on that.
I just want to encourage folks to come talk to us, and whether it's, you know, your personal experience or the experience of people you work with, what you're seeing in the marketplace. Rose, I thank you for your comment in the chat about Apple Pay Later. You know, we try and keep up, but we can always learn, and we're eager to learn from you and your constituents and from industry and from, you know, other regulators. So please come talk to us.
I'll just quote Christina's attributed quote to the head of the DFPI, and to say if it's not responsible, it's not innovative. And I guess at CRL we would say, you know, if it's not regulated, it's probably not responsible.
I'll take Troy's question. So yeah, Troy, you know, I think part of the key attractiveness of these products to consumers when they see this glittering button to show up in their checkout screen is that they don't pay anything up front. And so the revenue streams of these companies are split between taking fees from the amount that they're that is sold through the platform to that retailer, and then they charge additional fees for late payment or non-payment of the amount financed. So I saw in one news article that I read that I think it was a firm that their lowest fee was $8, and then the highest fee was a certain percentage. I think it was somewhere between 15 and 20% of the amount financed. And so that then, you know, yeah, I would, you know, for smaller amounts where 25% would be lower than $8, they obviously tack on the $8 fee, and then the other percentage for larger amounts financed.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, Spencer. We're at the end of our hour. We've covered quite a lot. I want to thank each of our panelists for the work they did, and also all the groups that contributed, all the different advocacy groups, consumer groups, direct service groups in California. This is the result of a lot of work, and I really think that you know, BNPL is something we're going to continue to be talking about. We certainly understand that it's convenient, but innovation comes with responsibility, just like Christina said. And so we haven't heard the end of this, and I hope it can be a conversation that CFA CRL, CLEAR, and DFPI are all engaging with you on the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Adam, for organizing this.